Alright, this is my Make Anything machine for shapes.io. First, I'm sorry if the audio was weird. My good mic died. I'm using my laptop mic. We'll see how it goes. Let's dive into this Make Anything machine. What you see here on the screen is the entirety of the machine minus the storage and feed area. The shapes pile up to feed into the hub. What we have here is a stackable multi-layer system. Each layer, if you can see at the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, is exactly identical. The same wiring, the same shapes, everything. And you can stack these up over and over again. You can make multiple machines. It's fairly compact. It could be compacted further, but I left some space in there as I made alterations and so on. So if you want to do this, you could do that compaction if you want. Let's start with the easy stuff. So down here at the bottom, I have my shape feeds. So all my shapes come in multiple lines. I send everything up a couple times to each layer. So you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4 stars, similar with circles and so on. They all feed up here to each layer. So one of them goes this big, as you can see here. Then my colors are built at the end of each layer. This set of stuff here is the color mixing and storage rather. This is the color mixing, and the painting happens later on. So first, pretty straightforward color creation. Red, green, and blue come in pure directly from a source somewhere. And then I have a basic mixer here for each color, and then one for white. This is as compact as I can make it. You could squish this around or realign these things and move your feeds, but this works just fine. And then all of this outputs and comes into the color storage area, which feeds up, and each conveyor belt here feeds 4 storages of the same color. You could chain these, skipping over to the next layer if you wanted to. I have the tunnel here, but I chose not to actually chain them all the way up, just for volume reasons. But you could do that. You could also add a secondary row or more to do this. So here we see each color, so 1 through 7, paired up just for the sake of space. I tried to keep each lane of each of the 4 bits for each layer in a 6 wide row set. So there's 4 copies of everything. This is basically 1 per quadrant per layer. Moving over here, we see here come the shapes. You can see they feed in. Again, they're chained across the set, and all 4 shapes in total are stored here on each layer. These all have filters in front of them, and these filters are all connected to wiring, which takes in the layer, which in this case is this layer here. Half the layer. The whole layer comes in right here through a splitter, so half goes to the bottom, half goes to the top. This will then be dealt with by splitting it again here and splitting it again here. So what we end up with, there's a rotation to make it make sense, is the top right quadrant having 1 bit of the layer on each one. These are rotated purposefully to make measuring easier, comparing easier. They'll get unrotated later to be the proper orientation. So each of these comes in, and it is just sent to a comparer that checks it against the contents of that particular storage bin. The filter is where the check actually happens. Filters can take not just a 0 or 1, but also a shape or a color, and compare that against what's trying to go through it. And if it doesn't match, it doesn't match. It does not send it through. If it does match, it sends it through. So I could trim this up even more by just having one analyzer right here, and then have the output split. I chose not to do that, so I was just tiling things really quickly, but you could simplify the wiring a little bit more if you chose to. So here, the shape, a white square, apparently, is being sent through, and at each one of these it says, alright, what is the shape? What is the shape comparison, and what is the color comparison? So the shape part I'm, for now, just dumping and ignoring. This T just acts like an insulator, allows me to pass right past it and not get interfered with. And it considers the color out to the filter. The filter compares, and if it's the same thing, lets it through. So if this is not white, none of these are moving through. You can see the filter comes through. But here, this is white, so it allows the white to go through. all of these colors are chained up to the same conveyor. They all end up coming out down here, just across this row and through. The very last comparer analyzer in the row, I do keep the shape output. Again, these T sections are just for installation, so the outputs and storages don't cause problems. The shape comes through. This is part of the reason I kept the whole shapes, and it also is compared against the shape storages in the same way, and those are output to the top. So here we have a white square, white's coming through the bottom here. The square part of it is being output from the square section here, and it just feeds out and comes this way. So that works pretty well. So that's the storage. Then here at the end, we have another filter, and this is really just to make sure that if it's gray color, it gets bypassed out and doesn't go through the painter. So that way I'm not wasting time trying to figure out how to get it out of the painter and not stacking up, causing problems. So either way, it comes in, it gets painted. I use the double painters for ease of use and efficiency. I paint the whole shape. Each of these whole shapes is going to become 4 pieces of the same quadrant, ultimately, so I can kind of multiply my output in this way. If it's gray, it would just bypass, in this case it's white, it comes out here. Either way, whether it's bypass at the top or through the painter, ends up in this joiner, which goes into a filter. This filter gets sent the combined shape. So going back a little bit, here was that last line, here's the individual shape. Just for the sake of quickness, I process it through by splitting it to color and shape whole, put them back together, and send it on through. These transistors act as bypasses to avoid nulls and to make sure that something gets sent through. So if there is nothing coming through, a null is sent through, and the rest of this just stops production, which is good. Here we are checking that is the shape I'm getting out of the painter, the shape I want for this layer, or this portion of the layer I should say. If not, trash it. If so, send it through, and it's going to get broken up into its component 4 pieces, all of which can rotate it around to the exact same orientation, which will then come through and be checked here to make sure that it is the shape I wanted. Again, we have null bypasses here and some comparisons. We've done some cutting to get down the right shape and comparing. I could have carried this shape around, I probably should have, but I was playing with the cutters and whatnot and ended up just trimming the shape myself. But passing this around over here would have accomplished the same thing, so you could skip this a little bit if you want to. Just break the chain here. Again, this transistor I think is a pass-through for null usage, and then once it gets broken up, it comes through here. These filters, again, they just check, do I have the right thing coming through? So right now you see we had a shape change, and it's currently killing anything that isn't this blue star piece, which will be filling in pretty soon here in a moment. So here the star pieces, the white's got to get filtered out, they got to die, and the blue's coming. So after the cutters, we kill things we don't want. Again, I have these filter and trash sections, pretty much every chunk, just to speed up the changeover from shape to shape. Moving on a little bit further, we'll come back to the wiring in a second. This is my first level stackers. So what happens here is each of these rows does the same thing. It gives me the corner I want, breaks the shape and colors it, breaks the shape up, and sends it through into an output here. And so then I stack these two together after rotating them properly. See the rotation here, here, and there. And then I get 2 halves of the same shape. So you can see outputting here I have a cyan, a blue star half, and down here I have this square and light and cyan as well. These, I'm sorry if I'm going backwards, the belts are so fast, it's just off from my refresh rate. Everything sometimes looks like it's going backwards instead of going forward, but it's going from right to left. So these come through and get stacked here. This stacks, I have double up basically, and I just split the outputs, one up here, one straight forward, similarly one straight forward, one goes down here, so I can just speed up my stacking process to get a full set. Then these feed into a similar deal, again stacking again to put the 2 halves together after appropriate rotation to give me a full shape. And here, let's look at the wiring for a second. This one here just has an on or off. This just tells me if I'm getting a null or getting something I don't want, to just kill anything coming out and bypass it. These null bypasses, what they do is they add up, And if, for example, there is no top right quadrant, then I skip the stacker entirely. That's what's happening here. So let's look at that for a second. So I come through with the shape, 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 and shape. If any of these is null, and I can't really show you this real quick in a second, but the bypass kicks in. This and will not be getting a positive I have a shape, if you will, from both. It'll result in a 0, and this will cause these filters here to be bypassed. So currently, when they both have shapes, a 1 is sent, which leaves the filter open, and they go and get stacked. If either one of these does not have a shape actually coming through, then all the filters get a 0, and they all bypass, and so I'll get just that one quadrant out. If both of these are 0, then that's fine also, just skip through. After this check is done, or the same kind of thing happening right here, and this is checked for is the entire half null, in other words, no shape. And the same kind of logic happens here for bypassing the final stacker to get it out the door as the entire layer. Here I'm bringing in the full shape just to do like a comparison. Is this the full layer of the shape? Is this the right stuff? If it is, great. If it's not, trash it. I do that actually in a couple different places, just for the sake of efficiency, really. One of these actually clears out the stacker queue. So here, if the shape is different, just anything that's left in up to this point right here will dump out into the trash, and then this one catches that last little bit. This just unclogs the stackers, which happens if you don't have it trash. It happens, it gets clogged up. It just takes longer to transition. Not a big deal. It could be done simpler. This is just a quick patch to get it handled, frankly. This being the final layer of the thing. Oh, right, shape change. This being the final layer, it just comes out and gets sent up to a final stacker. So no worries there. We'll come to the stacker in a second. So let's go back to the start just for a moment and look at the wiring here. So in comes the full shape. It gets split. Layer gets trimmed off. That top layer gets set and dealt with by this layer set, this 4-row layer set. The rest of the shape gets sent down. The process repeats. Again, split off the next layer, build the next layer, and keep going. Inside here, pretty straightforward. Once that layer comes through, then it's split off into half, and that is split into quadrants, as I showed earlier, which can get built. So just break it down to pieces and then build it back up again. So moving on through, after all this happens, the two halves get put together, the whole gets put together. Then we come to the last bit of wiring. Again, this is checking for the shape, and then this checks to see if anything coming through. If not, just trash whatever's left and nothing's coming through. But this is a stacker. It just takes the shapes top down. So if I get sent, let's say, a 2-layer shape, only these top 2 row sets will be working. These will be null, and these will stack up from here. This doesn't really care too much. It just checks for is the shape below me null, or is it nothing coming through? And if nothing's coming through, then I'll bypass and trash it. Otherwise, I kick things through. And then up here at the top is my final check. Is it the right shape? Yes or no? And if so, it gets sent through. I'm sending out 2 entire full stacks right now, just because I chose to do it that way for more throughput. You could do 1, you could do more if you wanted to, just stacking things up even more. Lastly, we'll go to how this kind of outputs. So I just have 2 lanes. I had to do some fitting of this stuff in here. If you had a clean build, you could pack it all together, but these come through and hit a storage unit. The storage unit just goes right on through until it gets backed up. If this backs up, the storage unit will start to pump things through this reader at some point, and that'll cause the whole thing to be released. The transition you just saw here happened because my other set, which is way out here, filled up. So I have some checks for these readers. If these readers are firing, as in something's going through them, that means that the storage is full or so close to being full. Then this all dies. And these filters flip. My second set of storage is filled up. And this is a full set of 16 rows. No, 16 rows here. Once this gets filled up, we will see these turn to a positive 1 on their output. Those get ORed together, and and it together, and then it's sent to an OR logic, which then sends it through. So here we go. And as soon as these back up, bam, this releases. And that also causes to the right here to cut off shortly. So these all come through, all 16 rows get packed down into 8, which then get split up and sent through all this way to the hub. Well, this other mesh you see here is me stopping and bypassing my feeds from all the other shapes to let these get through. And then once these get through and the shape changes, the feeds resume. So I can kind of get constant feeds of all the things I need for upgrades and what have you. So yeah, so here what happens is these receive the result of those belt readers plus the result of this belt reader, which is after the gates. And if this or the other one is putting out a 1, then the gates stay open. Once this is 0, element 0, this is sent through and the gates close. And that's really it. That is my new compact make anything machine. You could pack this even tighter. Obviously, I have a bunch of space in here that I don't need, which is what I put. But all of this takes up less than 1 zoomed out screen and is very, very efficient. If I had less belts, it would be even more efficient and faster. But it's doing pretty good. I'm on level 500 or 600 or something, I think, right now. So yeah, that's my make anything machine. I have another older one up here, which is much, much bigger, which I'll do a separate video on in just a moment.